There's a lot of popular kids shows that aired in the 90s on PBS, many of which are still well known today. But some of these shows seem to disappear and many people forgot about them. So we're going to look at some of those shows that maybe you forgot were on PBS back in the day, or maybe didn't even know. Tots TV is a show that began airing on PBS in 1996. It originally aired in the UK on the ITV network in January of 1993. This was a British children's program about puppet characters that lived together in a secret countryside cottage. Anne Wood was the producer and would go on to create Teletubbies later on. Tots TV was targeted at very young kids around the ages of 3 to 5. The show was filmed on location in Warwickshire in a scaled-down cottage that was built for the series. For the show, the three puppets it focuses on are Tilly, a French girl who speaks French, Tom, who is a boy with blue hair, glasses, and is very smart, and then Tiny, who is a boy with green hair and is the youngest. He's also the smallest of the three of them. The three Tots also have a pet donkey who lives next to their house. In most of the episodes, the kids go out into the real world and explore. They would learn about things such as animals, nature, and community. It was interesting because you would see real animals and real humans and then the puppets. So it's similar to Sesame Street in a way, I guess. The Tots also had a magic bag that is carried by Tiny, which gives them the tools they can use on their adventures. Tots TV was well received and a popular show in the UK, with it being a favorite of many children. In 1996, when the show began airing in America on PBS, the Tots accents were changed to American and Tilly was changed from French to Spanish. The show was liked in America, but not nearly as popular as some of the other shows on during the time. One reason for this could be that many of the markets aired the show mostly at 6 a.m. But overall, the show was a nice change from many kids shows, with it being slower paced and an overall calm feel. From 1993 to 1998, new episodes were produced for ITV, with the run ending in April of 98. In all, there was a whopping 276 episodes. Reruns of Tots TV ran on PBS until 2002 when it was taken off the air. Since then, the series has appeared on some other networks here and there over the years. Today, its PBS run seems mostly forgotten. The next show we're going to talk about is Wishbone. This was a live-action kids series that starred a dog named Wishbone, with the stories being told from his point of view. First airing on PBS on October 8, 1995, it was about a very smart dog who enjoys literature. This show was targeted at kids around the ages of 6 to 11, so a little bit of an older audience. In the show, Wishbone is a Jack Russell Terrier living in the city of Oakdale, Texas. His owner is a 13-year-old boy named Joe, and he lives with his mother Ellen, who is a librarian. Wishbone would talk to the viewer about famous literature and imagine himself in the story. He would play the role of someone like Robin Hood for those segments, but there would also be a main story plot involving Wishbone's real life on the show. He would go on adventures with Joe and his friends and be involved in the family's life. I think this was a really creative show because it was filmed with a real dog and voiced over. It was in a way that when Wishbone talks, it's just his thoughts that the viewer can hear. He can't talk with humans, and to them he's just a normal dog. It was also interesting how at the end of the episodes they would sometimes show behind the scenes of trainers working with him. The dog that played Wishbone was named Soccer and appeared in many TV commercials as well. He was one of more than 100 dogs to audition for the role and ultimately won it. After the show first aired in the fall of 1998, it received many good reviews from viewers of all ages. Despite the success though, there were just 2 seasons of Wishbone and 50 total episodes. The show aired its final new episode on PBS in December of 1997. The reason for the cancellation was primarily due to the high production costs of the show. The fantasy scenes were elaborate at times, and the overall cost was much more than the average show that they aired. Additionally, it was said that the show didn't have good merchandising potential as much of the other shows. However, reruns continued to air on PBS for several years, all the way until 2001. Some local affiliates continued to air it for several more years after that, and it was brought back to PBS Kids Go for a short time in 2007. This was a show that I think many people forgot about, and it's underrated because of how successful it was but short-lived. Theodore Tugboat was a show targeted at young children around the ages of 3 to 7 that began airing on PBS in 1996. However, prior to this, the show originally came out on the channel CTV in Canada. It's a Canadian series about a tugboat named Theodore. He lives in the Big Harbour, which was based on Halifax Harbour in Nova Scotia, Canada. In the show, there's one human character who's the harbour master. He generally sits in his office and talks to the audience and then begins to tell a story. He's the narrator for the show, and it shows Theodore and the other tugboats with him telling the story. Theodore is the main tugboat who's small but friendly. He's a harbor tug, meaning he has to stay in the harbor boundaries, but he wants to become an ocean tug to travel more. Overall, he's a very hard worker and is nice to everyone. Some of the other characters are the other tugboats, such as Hank, who's small and also funny. Emily is the only female tug, and she likes to travel around the world. George is the strongest, who also tends to show off a bit, and Foduck, who's the safety truck, is very serious and smart. In the episodes, the characters solve problems and learn lessons, as narrated by the harbor master. An interesting thing about the show is that it was filmed using remote-controlled boats in miniature sets, with the water colored blue. When the show came out, it received great reviews and was loved by many of the viewers. There was 5 seasons of the show, with new episodes being produced from 1993 until 2001. After the show started airing on PBS in 1996, it was well received there as well. But at the end of its run in late 2001, PBS lost the licensing and it was removed in 2002. For several years after that, reruns were shown in Canada, and the show was also briefly on Cubo for a few years from 2007 to 2009. Whimsy's House was another Canadian TV show that made its way to PBS. It first aired in Canada and was on a French channel in Montreal. In fact, the show was originally produced in French and it first came out in 1995. The show is for young children around the ages of 3 to 5 and is a puppet show. Whimsy is the main character, who's a bird and dragon hybrid. The characters in the show are different kinds of friendly monsters. She lives with her family, and the show follows her daily life with family and friends. There would also be songs in the episodes, and Whimsy's grandmother runs a daycare. 2 seasons were made of the show with 112 total episodes, airing originally from 1995 to 1996. In 1997, the show was translated to English and began airing on PBS. It ran from September of 1997 until fall of 2001, and then was taken off PBS. The show had mostly a good reception, but did have some bad reviews as well. Some found it to come across as a ripoff of Sesame Street or The Muppets. In fact, the show was sued by the Jim Henson Company for the characters looking so much like the Muppets. They ended up reaching a settlement. Also, some people found the characters to be creepy looking and the voices annoying, even going so far as to say that they were nightmare fuel. The show was broadcast on and off for many years, spending some time on different networks, such as This TV and Treehouse TV. Finally, we have The Naughty Shop. This was another kids show aimed for younger children. It was a Canadian show that was part live action and also part animation as well. It first aired in September of 1998 on TV Ontario and CBC in Canada, and was on PBS in the United States. The show is based on a series of British children's books by Enid Blyton of the same name. Naughty stands for Notions, Oddities, Doodads, and Delights of Yesterday. The main characters in the show are Kate and Truman Tomten and their friend DJ Johnson. The siblings hang out at their grandfather's vintage toy shop, and in the shop the toys can come alive when nobody's looking. One of these toys is Naughty, and the character Naughty becomes more prominent in later episodes. Truman also ends up being able to talk to the toys in later episodes. When the show came out, it received mixed reviews. Overall, a lot of people liked it, but many didn't like how it differed from the book series, and this wasn't the first Naughty series. This was about the 4th different one produced since 1955, with all of them being different. The series had just 2 seasons and a total of 66 episodes, airing until late 1999. Then reruns were shown on PBS until late 2002. There was another Naughty series made several years later in 2005. Overall, it seems like it's mostly forgotten as a PBS show today. That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.